Yes, we do.
Yep. Okay, good morning, everybody, and welcome. This is the Board of Health meeting for August 13th. We're going to go ahead and look it up. We definitely have a quorum. We're going to go for approval of the agenda.
I'll move to approve the agenda.
Do I have a
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a movement and a second to approve the agenda as presented. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Agenda is approved. Okay, we're gonna move on to item number 3, environmental health report. A, basic sanitation policy. Ian.
Hello, everyone. We're back to discuss the basic sanitation policy. I hope everyone had time to review it and have questions, comments, complaints. I don't know.
You have a whole list of them coming here.
Well, I don't know how much of a description you need, but, you know, I can just say that, you know, from a day-to-day standpoint, this policy mostly is being used to address properties that are, say, you know, a house that has an RV and that person is letting someone live on their property in an RV. How is that sewage managed? There are other situations where it's a vacant property that has, you know, 3 RVs or, you know, something like that, and how do they manage their sewage? So that's the main goal of this policy, is to address those situations. Those are the most common situations that we come up with. We do have a portion of it that can address guidance for some kind of sponsored homeless encampment. That could be, you know, it could be a church, it could be a municipality like, you know, the city of Shelton, it could be something like that, where they want to set up an encampment that has sanitation facilities for the residents, for, you know, a temporary habitation situation like that. We do have some provisions in there for that in case that situation ever does come up. But so far we don't have anything like that. So.
Are you the
I
one
will
that-
comment, I did really like the sections where you talked about guidance and assistance. Because that's the ultimate goal of code enforcement, I've always been taught, was compliance. It's not punishment, it's not fining, it's not taking people to jail, it's compliance with the code. And that is appreciated to see that in there. Look, we're gonna offer you assistance, we're gonna give you guidance, here's what we can do.
Are you the one that's sharing the screen?
Yes.
Can you just take it down for 1 minute so we can see if there's anybody else so I can keep
Sure.
track, please? Nope, that's everybody. Okay, go ahead. Well, you never know, there could be 20
Yeah.
behind it.
Yep.
Okay, so how do we want to kick this one off? Do you want to just go ahead and start hitting a few questions and see what we got?
Well, do you wanna go through it, kind of step
Like a
by?
summary?
And then that way we can question the sections rather than just random questions coming out that would go front, back kind of thing?
Yeah.
I don't mind either way, but if you already had a list,
Well, but.
They might get answered in
Yeah,
the summary
there you
of, or the
And I'll-
explanation of.
Maybe just kind of go through the basics of it as you go, maybe in, and then that way we can,
Yeah, so, I don't know if there's any questions about the first page. The first page, you know, just kind of discusses what the problem is, which is we have a lot of unpermitted living conditions, and the code solution is sewer system or septic system, and that often doesn't work for a lot of these situations. It's just not a feasible solution. So the problem statement kind of summarizes that. We have a reference to applicable regulations. So there's some planning regulations, there's the environmental health regulations, and then there are some regulations that are more like related to the state commerce department that relates to housing and homelessness, and they have a lot of programs that our counterparts in community family health address. And there is.
in the summary, one of the questions I wrote down was, it mentioned something about having no control over where people relocate. Does this policy, you feel, give you control?
This policy helps us keep them from just randomly dispersing, which is what was happening previously. In the past, we would go to a property, we'd say, you can't be here. You have to have a septic system or you have to have a sewer connection. Planning would say, you're not allowed to be here at all. And so then they would go somewhere else, and then the same problems would be at the next property, and the next property, and the next property.
But how does this change that? Except
So-
for you just let them stay in the same place and go.
But you're mitigating, the whole purpose is to try to mitigate the risk. So, you know, the question I always have for staff is, what is the risk if we do something? What is the risk if we don't do something? In this case, the risk is lower if we do something than to let it go, because as Ian was saying, for years we just chased these things around the county. They go from one place to another place, and then you're just moving around. If we can have some kind of something that helps mitigate the risk, and we have people in one location, then we're not having that kind of you know, whack-a-mole type of.
And that's the other thing, as I
activity.
said, how's it effective in mitigating the public health threats?
So what we're doing is we're not chasing someone away from a particular location. We're saying, okay, you can be here, you can follow these standards and guidance to take care of your sewage and your solid waste issues, and giving them an achievable goal instead of saying, connect to public sewer, connect to a septic system, which they have no ability to do. We say, do these things that mitigate the public health issue. We're not gonna chase you away. And
And
then-
that might be in a situation where someone's in a camper or something.
Yeah,
Awesome.
camper or a tent, those are both very common.
Because I know even in the city, there's RVs that people are living in backyards and stuff, and there's not proper sanitation to go with it. And again, when we talk about proper sanitation, I know up there, where you talked previously about porta potties, sand cans, not being acceptable. Would it help to add them to make them acceptable as temporary? I mean, we do it for construction, I get that. But if I'm living in my tent or camper, or there's a group of us living in these, I would think logic would dictate, is it acceptable to go, if you have a planned dumping with this company and blah, 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 that this would mitigate some of that?
Well, and that's what this policy is doing.
But it says it's not allowed.
No,
I thought
this
at the
policy.
beginning of it, it said is pit toilets, whatever, are
Oh,
not.
no, pit toilets are not
Different.
a chemical toilet. A pit toilet is you dig a hole in the ground
I
and
see,
you have a
okay.
seat over
You
it.
see those at the parks and stuff like that.
No, that's a vault toilet.
Yeah, so there's vault toilets. Pit toilet has no bottom to it.
We're gonna get a whole education on toilet city, Randy.
It has no bottom to it.
So would it
has
be
no-
like
it has
somebody
no
just
bottom.
dug a hole in
Just
their
dug a
back
hole, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an
backyard,
outhouse.
and that's what they're now
Well, they use them
using
up at
as
Cushman,
So,
for some of the off-the-grid, they call them pit toilets,
Mm-hmm.
compost,
no, those are pit, so a pit toilet is your
literally just a
you're-
hole.
You're going into a septic tank, and then the septic tank is pumped. So that's what
That's a
they're.
vault toilet.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying, vault toilet. They don't have pit toilets at the parks, at least they're not supposed to.
So, but that's what I'm talking about, the porta potties, and I know we discussed it last time, there was the, no, they're not allowed, that's not acceptable.
Yeah, they're not, porta potties, which are chemical toilets, are not allowed. This policy is proposing to allow it and to not take enforcement action against them for not having a septic system or a public sewer connection, and to allow them to use a chemical toilet.
Now, we have places, properties all over the place where they were done for summers many years ago. And they have tanks. And the RV comes in, it goes to the tank, and they have to have a agreement to have it pumped every so often. How does that weigh into this? Are we still
Those are,
allowing that? Is there
those
an
are,
issue?
those are allowed, that's considered a septic system.
And it's
If
not
they have
part
a
of
permitted
this, that's a
board.
different,
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
part, there's a different policy for that,
It's a tank
Yeah.
only permit.
right?
Yeah, we have a septic permit for that people regularly apply for.
So if we're telling people, you know, you can stay where you're at to mitigate some of the risks of them moving, is there an allowance in there regarding near watersheds or wells?
Yes, it can't be in a high-risk location.
So the buffers stream buffers.
That's not
still
in there,
apply.
is that, or did I miss it?
There's specific setbacks to something like a septic tank, which is just a holding device for sewage, which is 50 feet. And you can get down even lower than that. The bottom line is we're trying to prevent overflows to that. So if someone has a porta potty sitting on a stream, we're gonna say, let's work with you to relocate this to get this as far away from the water body as possible while still having it accessible to the contractor. We're trying not to put too many hard limits on, numbers on how far it has to be away from a stream. just because there are so many variable situations. And these are water-tight containers, they're not leaking and seeping everywhere.
And I get that, but you're putting them on me. When I gotta build a septic and do that.
But your
But-
septic system is discharging, and this is not discharging.
It's,
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
septics are contained until they're,
But so if I live in the county and I live on a well, and my neighbor pulls in an RV and starts discharging without a porta potty, and we address it, we still can give them 4 to 6 months to work on this?
I thought we talked.
And my well is over here?
No, we don't allow them to go more than a week discharging sewage on the ground.
Because this says it can be extended by the public health officer by 4 to 6 months.
To get certain parts of their plan in place. So we can go to the specific table that you're talking about.
Well, I guess the other question I had was exactly, what is it, the water treatment, W&P.
That's the waste management plan.
And so, do you have an example of one, or who approves those?
The waste management plan is a form that we'll create. If the board decides to allow this and approve this policy, we will create a form that they will fill out, and they will lay out what their sewage solution is, what their solid waste solution is, how they're going to address all those items. And at the end of this document, there's a definition for the waste management plan that talks about the minimum requirements for the plan. So they will have to fill that out and submit that to us that we will approve. And once that waste management plan is approved, that's when we say, okay, we're not gonna take enforcement action against you. You're following your waste management plan, you're doing what you need to do. The bottom line is, if there's sewage on the ground, that has to get stopped immediately.
Right.
And if after 7 days they don't have it stopped, we're issuing them infractions. That's our
Issuing
current,
the owner's infractions.
yes, that's our
Because
current.
ultimately, that's who's responsible for this, is the
Yeah.
owner of the property.
Right.
Yeah, because in the end, what you're talking about people parking and things, half of those are, I'm spitballing here, but half of those, owners don't even know sometimes that they're parking, railroad trestle.
No, I agree.
Is a prime example of that out there. We went and cleaned it up as a city and spent, I don't know how many dollars cleaning up that railroad trestle out there, and found out a sliver of it was owned by an absentee landlord, sliver of it was owned by the railroad, the city, the county, whoever else.
And then when you go after the absentee landlord, they can't do anything about it either. The state has so many provisions that makes it so hard for them to do it, they spend huge amounts of money, and it can be appealed and appealed and appealed.
It can be, but I mean,
Sucks.
his name was brought up before, Keith Fuller owns property in town. He had homeless encampments all over him. And he called us and wanted us to deal with it. And I'm like, can you meet us halfway on this, and some trespassing signs, some cut up the branches,
Yeah.
things like that, so we can actually, so we don't have to go traipsing into the forest to find this. But I guess what I had a hard time with the first time was hearing that the workload was so much that we're gonna slow down, is what it sounded like. You know what, your perception is everything. And when you said our workload is so much, we can't keep chasing these people all over town, so we're gonna relax the codes a little bit and use more discretion instead of doing that.
That's the same thing, same exact words that bothered me, so that is what was said.
And I have a hard time grasping that, you know what I mean, well, it's too much work, so we're not gonna do it. Because I think the pendulums swing back and forth with the state. I mean, you've been around long enough, Dave, to know that, public safety especially, you'll get the laws and the pendulum will go and everything starts one way, and then all of a sudden they go, whoops, that was a bad idea. Yeah, let's take it back this way a little bit. And it's happening now with homeless situations. The Boise decision and all those, they're going, wait a minute, that went too far. So now what do we do? And I know it's a chasing your tail all day long of going, we're gonna move them from one spot to the other, but that's what we signed up for. So, I'm off my soapbox now.
That is an option. The board could say, no, we don't want these to be allowed. We want septic systems or public sewer connections for anywhere people are living or
I
congregating.
tell you, I love
That's
the
what
idea
code
of porta
says.
potties. I think that's awesome. As long as they have the
Just they're
management plan in place, with the
Right.
company to
And,
dump them.
and I've worked with some folks that have, a relative, down on the luck relative, pull them up, something, and they put an in-ground tank in, but it's not, it's an RV tank. And then they have it pumped. So, I mean, it's a solution for that location.
I mean, they even have the
It works.
portable RV tanks that you can put on wheels and go out there.
Right. And we never know where those go
I was
exactly.
saying, they have to have someplace.
Yeah, but if they're
Yeah.
in the ground and a pumper comes out and pumps them, then we have records,
Mhm.
you know.
And that's what's required in the place, as a, you know, in real estate, there's so many of those around here, it's crazy. But at the same time, they're maintained on a regular basis. They usually have to have at least in the old days, they had to have an agreement for maintenance, that it would come out so often and it would be pumped in order to allow that.
And we sit in these same meetings and discuss closing beaches. You know, and that's where I start to go, okay, and I get it, this is that big of a piece of the closing the beaches. There's a lot of other, the septics and the
Yeah.
cows and everything else.
Well,
that comes into
the
play.
closed beaches have nothing to do with septic systems, like the ones we were discussing for Toronto, Belfair.
Currently.
Currently, yes, but I'm saying those closures that we have every year for those parks
Mm-hmm.
have nothing to do with septic systems for the most part. Their volume, use, dogs, it's
Mhm.
just, there's so many people on those beaches, there's tons of dog poo, there's lots of people thrashing and stirring up stuff in the water, that those bacteria levels come up. And then as soon as we close the beach, it drops to nothing. And if it was, oh, there's failing septics or whatever, that wouldn't be the case. It's too much people activity on those beaches and bad sanitation practices while they're there that cause those beach closures. Shellfish is another case. If you're talking about, you know, shellfish growing area closures, those can be failing septic systems. Those can be livestock
Animals.
issues,
Yeah.
yeah.
But that's what I mean, I live on a creek. And so, you know, the concern I have is this gonna open the door to if these empty lots along this creek are sitting out here and I bring a motorhome over there, you know, you understand what I'm saying? It's my well water.
Well, actually, that's the question I'll be hit with, is if we do this, I'll have Constance and others that will ask that exact question of me, and how do we actually regulate it? Because the one thing, as you heard him say earlier, I have a problem with the idea that we just won't do things because we can't. But by establishing this, somebody's gonna have to do this, or we're gonna be in the exact same location. This is gonna take a lot of work to enforce.
It's definitely not it's definitely not a zero burden policy. There's monitoring, there's follow-up, there's writing these plans, working with property owners to do that. But there's a bigger public health risk for them just going places, because then they pollute for months until someone finally reports them. And then we show up and tell them they can't be there, and then they go somewhere else and pollute for months. And it's just this endless circle of going nowhere with the individuals.
Again, I can consider it going nowhere if we have them and they go somewhere else. I have my beaches to worry about, I have my community and our well also to worry about. I can't do the whole world. So I look at it from a different perspective.
But as the Board of Health, it's not just your beaches, it's the whole county.
No, that's what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. I mean in my county, I don't mean my, because I don't
I
have
think they're
beaches.
moving around within our
They're
county.
more,
Yeah.
yeah, they're
But
not leaving.
If we do
Mason
things
County.
that they'll be tougher to do that.
Yeah.
and
I mean, I
enforcement.
was just over by St. Pete's Hospital today for work.
Yeah.
And you've got that whole situation that's.
Again, they've chased them off again. They come back
And there were
again.
fire trucks there, but there are porta potties, there's big garbage cans. I mean, that's what they're doing to mitigate the population that very large encampment that's on that other side of the road.
In the community porta potties, in this community anyways, our luck hasn't been very good, because when we put them up at the shelter over here and other places, the septic companies came in and said, we're not gonna do them anymore, because people were putting sleeping bags, syringes, and they were trying to pump these things and
Yeah.
going, we can't pump them out because they're used as a dumping ground.
Yeah,
So that, for the community part of it,
Is
as we
another
move
issue.
forward, that they're not, as a personal thing, if I'm living on the property, that's one thing. But as a community encampment, that's where we've had issues in this community of people just stuffing things in and using them as a dumping ground or shooting up.
Stuff wherever they can. Yeah, regardless of whether it's a contained.
So-
yeah, some-
So
Spot or not.
if you have a porta potty, you gotta pay to also have a trash receptacle next to it.
There you go. So one of the questions I had, it talks about temporary encampment, number exceeds OSS capacity. What is that?
So temporary encampments, that term is talking more about one of those sponsored situations where it's like, there's this property and we have room for X number of individuals there. So if someone were to propose a site they wanna host, and there are some cities that do this, they'll have like,
Right.
you know, someone will have a yard in a city and they say, I can have 3 tents on my property.
Well, the city proposed it about 10 years ago. I think
Yeah.
it's still in the code somewhere.
So there are jurisdictions that have that, and this is just our way of like, okay, this person wants to do this, the city's allowing it, so here's our guidance for what you have to provide for them. That's what that is
Okay.
really for. When it comes to someone's private septic system, if they have a 3-bedroom septic system and they have a 3-bedroom house and they bring in 1 RV, depending on the use and the occupancy of the house, it could be fine. Is it, from an infrastructure standpoint, more than what the septic system can handle? Possibly. But for most cases where that's happening, we're giving people guidance on how to best manage their septic system, and at the same time, we're saying, we don't recommend this because you could be overburdening your system if you're really careful with this.
And then what we're trying to do is protect their investment of what they got in the ground.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
because a new septic system is not cheap.
About 30 or 40 grand.
Well, and then plus you already have systems in place for to have those septic systems inspected.
Mhm.
I know that the city got some people in the city got notification that their septics needed to be inspected, but
They're on sewer.
they're on sewer.
Yeah, so we send that out every year, and people complain every time. The bottom line with that is it's more expensive for us to give our vendor a list of the septic systems in the county to mail to than it is to just do a mass mailing. So we're saving the taxpayer dollars by sending it
Right.
in a mass mailing form versus getting them
And
to
knowing if
do
you
By
do
it.
sending it in every box instead of
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
situated or
Yeah,
Yeah.
separated, yep.
But I think,
so yeah, that comes up a lot.
Yeah.
Angry people call us every year like,
Well,
you're
you-
wasting our tax
You
dollars.
could put
But
that
there
actually
are-
on the flyer, though.
Mhm.
You could, to let them know for the
you
future.
could, but back to this. What I was getting at was that we already have systems in place to inspect the septic. So if you have an RV on there, we talked about this yesterday. If you have an RV on there and it overflows, then you've got another issue that you're gonna have to deal with. So what this policy does is it just gives you, guys, it's a policy, it's guidance. It's not we already have the regulations in place. This is, and from what you told me yesterday, is that people are doing this just gives them a little bit more teeth, more direction, not
Yeah,
teeth,
more
but
direction and structure and consistency,
Right,
so that one inspector is not different from another inspector when they talk to people and interact with people.
right, right.
So what is the extension for then? If I'm discharging illegally, but
The,
it talks about giving 4 to 6 months of extension.
the extensions, we can go to that specific page.
Sure.
For the extensions for that chart, are you looking at the very first table?
I don't have the page number on that one, I'm sorry.
Okay, so table 1 is just, a good example, if we're looking at scenario 1. So there's no septic available, and there's 1 or more living units on the property. So this would be, there's a vacant property, and there's, let's say, 2 RVs on the property. So we would say, you need to have a chemical toilet, you need to have a solid waste solution. If they have sewage on the ground, we're saying this needs to stop immediately. And if it's not done within 7 days, then they're getting infractions. That's our standard process right now.
Right, so once it's identified, then
Yeah.
you're giving them a deadline of, you have to fix it, or, right?
Yeah, and so then the extension timelines that you see in here, this is saying 1 month for the waste management plan. So that's that plan document filled out and signed by them saying, I'm going to do all of these things to manage my sewage and my solid waste long-term. And so we're giving them 1 month to establish the waste management plan, but we're not allowing them to dump sewage on the ground for 1 month. We're just giving them a month to develop that waste management plan. If for some reason there is some issue that will prevent them from complying with the waste management plan, then that's another case. But we do have this up to 6 additional months for installation of a new OSS. If it's feasible for them to install, in this scenario, there's the property, they're living in an RV, but let's say they're the property owners and they do have the ability to install a septic system, then we're allowing them to use porta potties while they work on installing their septic system. And we're putting a timeline in there to get them to install their septic system in a reasonable amount of time that's not just, you can do it one day and be you use the porta potty forever. That's, you could look at that and say that's, not consistent with another situation where they don't have the ability to put in a septic system because we might be allowing them to live on porta potties for years.
It's really kind of aimed at people who are building a home, that pull an RV in, they've got, want to use the porta potty until they get their septic system up and running. And, sometimes it takes a while to get the permit, from planning for the whole permitting process complete.
We had an issue in
Sometimes takes a while.
Story Road with 2 couples that lived, this couple had an RV, this couple had an RV, this one got their house built faster than the other. And they were mad at this couple because they weren't getting it faster and they had a porta potty out there. And the county came in and started writing citations to them for having a porta potty out there and dumping. And next thing you know, they sold the property to this couple because they pushed them out. But it was, and that's where I think the porta potties is a
Yeah.
10 times better idea than anything else.
Yeah.
Bucket.
Yeah. It's difficult to have a policy that fits every situation.
Oh, yeah.
Good
Because
luck on that
people,
one, yeah. What about gray water during this time?
Gray water is sewage.
Okay, well, they're not gonna, if they've got an RV, they're not gonna be walking it by buckets out to the porta potty.
The RV situation, what we usually try to guide people toward is not getting a chemical toilet or Santa can. We usually try to guide them towards getting a RV holding tank. So it's this accessory holding tank that they can get from, some septic vendor that gives them more storage capacity than what they would have.
With a requirement for pump out?
Yeah.
yeah.
Because if not, it's gonna,
It's the same thing as the chemical toilet. We do have some people that don't do that, they get the chemical toilet and then they take buckets of stuff out and they dump it into the porta potty. We do have people that do that, but we usually try to get them to go the route of the holding tank, because the holding tank is easy for them, there's no transfer, it's,
the thing for me is I have little opposition for the RVs and stuff like that. It's some of the other stuff that I'm more afraid of, but the RVs, I don't have very much opposition. I am gonna question though, when the time comes, that we have a situation right now, we're talking about because of food trucks and stuff, that we have it in code, but we're thinking that by passing it here, it becomes the rule too. But if we have it in code, the code was approved and put in by the commission, so we're gonna have to figure out how we're gonna do these things, because what we're replacing, we have in code, codified as the county passed through the commission. In the old days, we had, the commission was the board, so when they did it, they had those different authorities. And this is coming up right now, so we're gonna wanna look at that a little more.
yeah, it's definitely a messy situation with the history of the code versus what the Board of Health Authority is. I agree with you. I think Kevin had his hand up.
Kevin, did you have your hand up?
I did, yeah, thanks Ian. So just on these extensions, are they, so it's up to 6 months for that extension. Are you able to sort of tailor that timing to different, to individual scenarios? So like, if based on, your inspection and your work with them, would you be able to do like a 3-month extension versus a 6-month, and then check in after that? I mean, how do you or is it just a blanket, we're able to offer the 6 months, and so we do the 6 months, and then,
Yeah.
catch up with you
So-
at some point,
So we do
close
this,
to when that clock runs out?
yeah, so this comes up with all of our code enforcement cases. We never give someone the maximum extension possible. What we say is we have a conversation with them and we say, this is an issue, this is in violation of the code. What is your solution and how soon do you think you can get this done? If they say, we can get this done in 3 months, then we don't say, I'll give you 6 months. We say, okay, 3 months, I'll check back up with you at this date, or if you get the permit submitted or whatever it is that they have to do, send that to us and let us know, and then we follow up with them at that time. But we have the 6 months in there because that's a hard limit on what the staff can approve before they need to involve me or involve the health officer or the director to say, do we really want to give them more time? Is it, an extenuating circumstance that came up that makes sense to give them more time beyond the 6 months, for instance, in this situation?
Great, that's super helpful. Thanks, Ian.
So for those that are on the board and watching this, I don't mind during this process, because we're actually looking away from the camera, I don't mind if you just unmute and say, hello or whatever, and join in. Go ahead.
Receive, thanks.
You talk about not being able to meet everybody's needs in this, and that's the other issue I look at is with these waste management plans. I think it's a great idea. Do you really think they're gonna fill them out?
They will have to fill it out, or we will proceed with enforcement action.
Enforcement, yeah.
Well, and I guess that comes to the biggest question of all. What does that actually look like? Because we already have this situation now, and it goes to enforcement action, but nothing. When can we do something that puts some teeth in the enforcement action?
That is a big conversation. I don't know if you want to get into that today, but that is a major issue that is a statewide issue. It involves lack of prosecutors, lack of interest from the courts.
So there's two comments I had to that. One, if I'm a property owner and they're on there, I can evict them off my property. And I think as a county, city, or otherwise, we should be, if you're the property owner, yeah, you get a citation, but I'm also gonna guide you into how to get rid of this.
Yeah, and
You
we
know
do
what I
that.
mean? It should be a twofold kind of thing, because you do get some who just drag it out and drag it out. Oh, I need your help, and they really don't take your help, they just wanna drag it out, so they should be twofold. And the other part of that is, oh gosh, I lost it. This is what happens when you get old and retire. Keep going. It'll come to me.
I had a quick question on the waste management plan, because when I'm thinking about that too, different scenarios are obviously gonna be different. Are you saying you will be giving them assistance in filling out that waste management plan?
Yeah.
Because if somebody's not aware
Yes.
or not sure or not literate enough to actually do it,
Yeah,
they'll get some help in actually filling out that plan and understanding that there's enforcement.
yeah, what we do for all these situations is we have essentially like an assistance packet of information where it's like, here's where you can get resources, and that's where our community family health staff come in. We refer them to our community family health staff.
Okay.
And there's is it 211? The 211 line, there's a bunch of different resources out there. We give them those resources, and we try to guide them to finding solutions to the things that are in violation of the code. For some of them, there are a lot of resources. For others, there are not many resources.
You're talking about the owners and the residents.
Yes, both. There are some situations where we have an owner and the owner says they're squatting there, but they're not really squatting there because they told them, a year ago, yeah, you can stay here, and now they've kind of overstayed their welcome, but they've established residency and they got to go through an eviction, but we have a situation like that get really complicated, and I'm sure you've seen some of those.
Or they paid them $50 one month to stay there, and 12 months later, they're still there.
Yeah, so there are many different scenarios, and we say that as long as we talk to them and we say, as long as this person is here, they have to have a sanitary disposal means for their sewage and their solid waste. If they are not here, then you no longer have to provide that. So whatever method you want to go to, if this is a situation where you need to do an eviction, here are some resources for how to go through the eviction process. But otherwise, there's a list of certified contractors for septic services. You can contact them if you want to get a sanitary.
There's a lot of hurdles, because even that, the tow companies don't want these RVs. They don't get the money out of an RV that they do out of a car that's salvaged. And so that's what we've run into anyways, is the tow companies.
They don't want it.
You're the owner, you call up and say, get this hunk of junk out of here, and they're like, I don't want it.
We do have a resource that does take them.
Perfect.
We have a resource.
And that's something to hand to the owners out there and
Yeah,
go, you,
they'll take RVs and boats,
Yeah,
because
boats, huh?
boats are also difficult.
Are they charging them to take them, or what is?
I
The
have to
cars
look
that
at
actually
it.
charge, that's the,
Most of the ones that I've heard of, they're taking them for free unless they're
wow.
crumbling.
Right. And they're pulling the copper and stuff out.
Yeah,
Salvage.
in all these years, I haven't seen that, so yes, that needs to be
Yeah.
spread around.
so when you do the waste management plan, again, clarify, so if I'm the absentee owner, do I get notification of all these actions you're taking? Because I wanna know if you're on my property, and again, we've had them out here numerous times, if you may go out there and find the trailer on the property and start giving them the waste management plan and all that, do we then send something to the owner as well?
We are primarily communicating with the owner, so every owner is receiving a notice of violation for what's going on with the property. If we can't, sometimes we can't get any contact from the owner,
Right.
and then we're just having that face-to-face communication with whoever's on the property, and we say, are you the owner? And they say, no, but, it's my brother and he lets me stay here. And we have no way to know whether that's legitimate or
But
not.
that needs to be included in there as a mandate though, because over the years, we've seen through different codes and stuff, it sounds all good, but the truth of the matter is, there's a lot of times the owner has no clue what's going on their own property, and somebody went and did this and did that, got
Well,
this
you
type
just send it
of.
to the owner of record.
That's
Yeah,
why
but
I
I
want to
mean,
get a letter.
put it into the actual thing that we're doing, that it must,
The
that's a
policy.
shall, yeah. Don't leave it
It's-
open,
That's already, that's a legal requirement, we already do that. That happens no matter what, and this policy does not waive that, that is standard procedure
Usually
for all
see
of
the
our cases.
certified mail or something like that, so
Yeah.
they, you can say that, yes, they got it. I remembered my last one, the prosecutor issue.
Mhm.
I would suggest, and I'd be happy to help with any of this, as a board or with your office, what about hiring contracted special prosecutors for code enforcement?
And
We can talk about that, yeah.
we've discussed that. This
Because-
is once
Because I
again
get
going down
Dorsey's
the,
office is packed and they're busy and they don't wanna
Yeah.
deal with it, but if you could deal with it at a municipal level or something like that
well,
with a
it would still have to
contract.
be connected through them, nobody here has the authority to do anything like that unless
so
it's granted.
this is getting down the rabbit hole of the enforcement issues, but, I've done lots of research, talked to lots of other jurisdictions and the prosecutor's office about this. They've said that they would be okay with us hiring one. However, when I talk to neighboring jurisdictions that have dedicated prosecutors, they don't have a prosecutor resource deficiency, they still can't get their cases prosecuted and through the court system successfully. It takes them several years to get anything through, usually takes about 8 hearings.
Well, code enforcement in general takes a long time.
But that timeline is very, very long
Mhm.
for, say, a solid waste case, where the person has 20 tires and 10 couches in the yard or something like that.
I totally understand, and I get it, the frustration, but again,
I'm not saying frustration wise, just like solid, resource
yeah,
wise.
but I mean, you look at 405 East E Street, in 2014, that was a shooting gallery out there, got demolished, the city got reimbursed for 405 East E 10 years, this year, finally sold the property, got the tax lien on it, so yes, it takes a long time to get through, but I still think it might be worth something looking at and going, because especially if you're doing it within the city area or municipality level, you got a smaller court. You don't have to go through the county court.
We're
But we
reaching with the
don't,
district court?
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
no,
ours.
a city.
The city court.
Okay.
But-
Oh,
I don't know that we could do that through the county.
I don't know.
What
but take some-
we can maybe do though is, but the oldest question is always money. But I think we have money to do something like this, especially if we get it, but you can, open another commissioner, court commissioner position. Contract out for court commissioners, they do that in some of the larger areas like Kitsap County, stuff like that. Most all your tickets are gonna go through a contract, court commissioner. As long as
The
they're not
city-
going to jail and stuff like that,
Yeah.
they're allowed to be tried by a court commissioner.
Because the judge that sits on the city is a part-time judge.
Yeah.
And I know he does outside work, like you're saying, per
Yeah.
diem to go to different jurisdictions.
Yeah.
He's works in Kitsap.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it is,
Plus
but,
we have the one
so,
that's running for Court,
Yeah.
for Superior Court. She's a commissioner.
Yeah. But with the commissioners, you can contract it, you can do as many as you want, they just can't try certain cases. So it'd be something we'd have to look at a budget.
Because in general, these are not gonna go
Prosecutor
to
and
a
a,
jury trial in general.
In these cases, we're looking potentially at taking away people's liberty and property, so we can't go that route. Because these cases can eventually become a criminal case if the prosecutor decides to go that way. And the backstop to this is we're gonna take away their property and abate the violation.
well, it depends on what you do and what you create the actual code or what to say. Literally, that doesn't necessarily have to be that, and as you said.
That's just the way the code
It's what,
currently is.
it's what currently, and that's what I wanna talk to him about later on. But at the same time, it's also, it's not that crime until the prosecuting attorney files it to be that. So it still falls underneath the commissioner until a prosecuting attorney decides they wanna go for a criminal case that cannot come underneath that commissioner.
I think this is another topic,
Yeah,
other than
Yeah, other than
this,
our
so
policy.
if we can
Right,
get
right,
back to
yeah.
this, that would be great. But, and then let's talk about the enforcement issue at another date, I'm sorry, I'm overstepping, but.
No, you're probably
It's good
right.
to keep
We're
it
getting
on.
down, like you said, down the rabbit hole.
yeah. Other questions about, have I satisfied everyone's questions, or? is there any
You have
other
done an
things that are
outstanding job answering
lingering?
the questions, yes.
So the tables are, you know, specific to the items that they address. And like I said, there's all the different scenarios. There's a property that has infrastructure, there's a property with no infrastructure. There are the homeless encampment situations, there's a group of RVs situation. We've tried to encapsulate all of those and address those in a consistent manner. Moving on from those, we have just some more guidance for how staff would handle situations they come across, which, you know, all the time we'll go out and we'll find that there's a tough shed that's been dropped on the property and people put a shower in it in a kitchen. Those are non-permitted, you know, situations with plumbing, so we tell them to remove the plumbing, we have guidance for how to do that. There is, you know, the exception for, you know, like a fish washing sink or, you know, a veggie washing sink, so that we're not telling people that that's illegal and then kind of overstepping and creating a lot of drama for something that's really not a big issue. So that's why we have exceptions in for that. The definitions section is just bringing in a lot of information from the Department of Commerce, so that we're staying consistent with them as far as terminology goes and what these different living situations look like. The most important thing that we added in here was the definition of what a waste management plan is and what it includes. And then we have some guidance on plumbing systems, which creates some standards for the need for numbers of toilets and showers for people. And some of that would be more likely to be used in those larger encampment situations. Like we said, if the city of Shelton decided to create an encampment, you know, how many toilets do they need per person, how many showers do they need? And, you know, throughout this document, we have the backstop of, you know, everything ends with, we will look at our codes and you know, find a enforcement option that meets our needs if they're not able to comply with this policy at any time. So code enforcement still is the ultimate end if they don't comply. And if someone stops complying, that's it. I mean, they've lost their chance to work with us, because a lot of this policy is, there is, you know, some element of trust with the person that we're working with. We're coming to an agreement with them and they're agreeing to not mismanage their sewage.
And unfortunately for your staff, it's not unusual for people to do just enough to get to that point for now. And then 6 months later, just enough to get to it. That's a challenge.
Yeah, but in this situation, there are no second chances when it comes to that. We're still going to issue them infractions for their failure to comply. And depending on the situation, probably going all the way with our case to stick to the letter of the code and say septic system or public sewer connection, you showed that you were not able to be trusted with this responsibility to follow your waste management plan. That's how it's currently structured, and that's how we currently operate. There are no second chances when someone violates a waste management plan.
So on Zoom, is there anybody on Zoom that has any questions or comments they'd like to throw in?
Not for me at this point.
Me either.
Who's the bottom one?
Then you comment, I don't know.
Okay, all right, what do you think, guys?
I had one more question, just because coming from the school board side of things, we always have model policies that come out of our governing association, and they get checked out through legal and things like that. Is that similar in this situation for a written policy like this? Is this a policy that's being adopted in other counties, or is this specific to Mason County?
This policy
Was it built off of model
is,
policy?
this policy was modeled off of Jefferson County's policy, and there's other policies like this in other jurisdictions. The environmental health directors for most of the jurisdictions in the state all have the same issue, and we've all been kind of doing things the same way as far as trying to mitigate the public health risk while not just chasing people around it infinitely. Because even in the more highly funded jurisdictions, they still don't have any ability to handle the load of
They just put
of
rocks.
issues.
They just put rocks.
That's true, they do. Well, I mean, some of that are the cities, as far as the county health departments. They all have the same issues, and Jefferson County drafted a written policy, and then many of the other counties looked at Jefferson County's policy and adapted those to their own jurisdiction. And that's what we've done here.
Have you contacted them to see how it's working?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, this is these things that we're doing, we've been doing, and they've been doing for many years now. It's not like we wrote this policy and it's this new program that we're doing and we're seeing how it works. This has been something that's in place and we've been doing, and it's just being formalized in writing so that it's not this arbitrary thing. So there's a structure to it, so it's consistently enforced, it's consistently done between inspectors.
So we talked about it at the first meeting, policy versus practice. You guys have had a policy, or have a policy,
We've had a we've
but your
been
practice
doing this.
wasn't following that policy.
We didn't have a policy, we had a code, and practice was not following the code.
There you
Yeah,
go. And so you're making this policy to follow the practices that you've been doing.
yes, so that it's no longer, like I said, arbitrary. That we never want things to just be like, this inspector's doing this, and this other inspector's doing this. We want it to be structured and consistent. And at the same time, we want the Board of Health to be aware of what we're doing and to have full knowledge of what we're doing. It's not like, oh, what are you guys doing? Kel Rowan was gonna be here today, but I think she's having a personal thing. She is the community development director, and so they have a big piece in this, which is their zoning code gives them the ability. So when we have these cases, we would normally, environmental health would go out and say, there's sewage everywhere, and they would go out and say, you're not allowed to do this on your property. You can't have RVs, you can't have encampments, you can't have camping of any kind, you're not zoned for this. So that was the two-pronged approach we used to attack these code violations. But because of the shuffling around perpetually and just never having any resolution to the actual public health threats that were involved in these cases, it was a joint decision between the departments to scale back code enforcement and adopt this approach.
And I appreciate the transparency, because like you said, like the board know, because if people somewhere said, here's the code, are you following the code? And I say, yes, we are, and then I come to you and you go, no, we're not. We're doing this practice, which is not following the code. That's appreciated, it is.
So now on this, are you hoping for a code change? You looking for us to approve it and do the same thing as on the food? Because I don't know where that's at right now, just talking to Mark, that's, it may be a better recommendation to have them, the board approve it, to send it forward to the commission to change in code. I'm not sure what the best way to go is here.
Well, this is not code, this is policy. So we don't want to change the code because we need that legal backing to
Yeah.
do code enforcement when people violate this.
This is a public health policy,
Yeah, this is a public
not a
health
county
policy.
policy, a public
Right.
health policy.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yep,
Okay.
So we still,
because it would apply within the city, it would apply
So, yes.
anywhere, yeah.
as far as the food thing goes, the street vending is approved. We are creating a permit type, and that's going forward. The Board of Health has authority for that, and that is something that's not a code change because it's already allowed in code. It's a policy decision on the Board of Health's part to either allow these or not, because the code allows the Board of Health to make that decision. The code says that the Board of Health and the health officer can decide to issue variances to allow street vending. So that's why that item is not a code change.
Okay, because I was talking to Mark just a minute ago, so we need to clarify that.
Mhm.
That does make sense, if there's already a variance, ability to have variances that you can create, that makes more sense. So, on this, is somebody wanting to make a motion? Or you want more time, or what are you thinking? That goes to whoever's on line also, if somebody wants to make a motion, have more communication, or table it and think about it, now's the time.
So do we need a motion, or do we just need to allow the chair to sign? I mean, a
I
motion
think
to
you
approve the
need to
policy?
put it in the record, you would want a motion allowing the chair to sign.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so moved and seconded to go through the implementation of this policy and allow the chair to sign. Any discussion?
Yeah, I'll just say that I think these are really good conversations to have. This is a complex issue that faces not just our community, but frankly, communities across the state as well. And keeping these issues front and center and setting the right kind of expectations for the community and for staff, I think is really important. So I hope that we have an opportunity to continue to discuss this in other venues as well. But appreciate the work, Ian and Dave, that you put into this and getting it in front of us so that we're able to help you have the tools that you need to be effective out in the community and really set that right expectation for folks, both that are making complaints and those who might have some issues to clean up as well. Thank you.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to second what Darren said. If this is a movement towards more compliance, then this is something that we should absolutely do. And thank you for your hard work in copying what other people are doing, and that we can apply that here. So thank you very much.
Any other comments? All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Nay.
Nay. So, I still have
Don't
questions.
take it, I
Oh, no,
appreciate all the
okay.
work you're doing on this, I don't have the answer, but I don't know if this is the answer.
Yeah. And for myself, it's just, I do like what you've done, but without the other end of the conversation of how to actually enforce what is done, I don't know that we've accomplished what I'd like to see. I'm not against anything you've done, I think you did some great work.
I've got
But
no problems with it.
yeah, the motion has passed though, and it has gone into policy.
Okay.
Next up. Next up
I have
is,
some minor typos to fix, so I'd like to send you a different copy.
okay, that's fine. Next up is other business and board discussion. Is there any discussion from the board? How about out in Zoom land?
None for me.
Nothing for me either.
Any public? We have one on there we don't recognize. Would the public like to comment on Zoom? If you'd like to comment, please unmute yourself, say your name, and we'll call on you.
I can't see it from here, what did it say?
It says W. Gano. Gano?
Here,
I think that's,
That's city code
This is
enforcement.
Will Gain, I'm the code enforcement officer for the
The
city of
city.
Shelton.
okay. All right, well, I thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. So if there's no public comment, we're down to item number 6, which is adjournment. I'll take a motion.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Is move second, we adjourn. Is there any objection? Hearing no objection, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah.